The ship jolted as we broke through the planet's atmosphere, a bone-rattling reminder of how far we'd come from the comfortable, controlled chaos of deep space. I'm the team's pilot, though around here titles are just formalities. We've all done a little bit of everything by now. Space will do that to you, forces you to learn new skills or get left behind. Jax, the muscle of the team, leaned over my shoulder, eyes wide with a rare look of uncertainty. "Not exactly the welcome party I was hoping for," he muttered, his voice low and rough like gravel grinding together. I followed his gaze. There it was, the colony, or what was left of it. "Looks like it hasn't seen a human in years," I replied, my stomach nodding with something I didn't quite want to name. Dread, maybe? Anticipation? "Are you sure this is the place?" Elena, our tech expert, piped up from the back. She was already tapping on her data pad, searching for some sort of signal or communication from the colony, but all she got in return was static. "This is it," Captain Wyatt said, his voice firm as ever. He stood behind me, watching the decaying structures grow larger as we descended. "But something's wrong. They were supposed to be transmitting. There should be lights, activity, something." But there wasn't. The colony looked like a ghost town. Skyscrapers of twisted metal jutted into the sky, crumbling at the edges, the buildings weathered by time and neglect. Roads that had once bustled with life were silent, filled with nothing but the dust of abandonment. It didn't feel like we were arriving. It felt like we were trespassing. I slowed the ship to a hover, circling over the main square. "I'm not seeing any movement," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No signs of life?" Captain Wyatt's brow furrowed as he looked down at the wreckage. "No signs of death either." That was somehow worse. We touched down in what must have been a landing bay once upon a time, but now it was nothing but cracked asphalt and rusting equipment. The silence was unsettling. Not a single breeze. Not a chirp of life. Even the stars above seemed muted, as if they too had abandoned this place. "Jax, ever the optimist," broke the tension. "All right, gang. Last one off the ship has to clean the filters." I snorted. Leave it to him to crack a joke when we're standing on the edge of a nightmare. But that's how we dealt with the unknown. Humor, bravado, pretending like none of this shook us. We suited up and stepped out, our boots crunching against the barren ground. The air was thick, stale, like it hadn't moved in centuries. Elena was already scanning, datapad in hand. "Nothing yet," she murmured, her voice tight. "No surprise there," I said, checking the perimeter with a sweep of my visor. "This place looks like it's been dead for years." "Or decades," Jax added. We moved into the colony's main square, walking past buildings that looked like they had been hastily abandoned. Cafes with overturned chairs, storefronts with shattered glass, equipment still rusting in the streets. It was as if everyone had left in a hurry, but left behind everything they owned. "What the hell happened here?" Wyatt murmured, more to himself than to us. We pushed deeper into the colony, through empty plazas and deserted corridors, all eerily silent. And that's when we found the first clue. A journal half buried in the dust. I bent down, brushing it off carefully. It was old, the pages worn and yellowed, but the writing was clear enough. The day it all went dark. I showed it to Elena, who scanned the pages with quick, practiced fingers. "It's a personal log," she said, frowning. "They talk about an event, but there's no details. Just fear, panic." "What kind of event?" Jax asked, leaning in to peer over her shoulder. "I don't know," she muttered, her eyes scanning the lines. "They didn't live long enough to tell us." That's when we heard it. A screech. Sharp. Inhuman. The kind of sound that sends ice shooting up your spine. It echoed off the walls, bouncing through the corridors of the forgotten colony like some sort of sick warning. We all froze. Jax was the first to recover, his hand flying to the blaster on his hip. "Did anyone else hear that?" "No," Elena said, her voice thick with sarcasm. "I just imagined it." We fanned out, instinctively forming a circle with our backs to each other. Wyatt was already scanning the shadows, his jaw set in that way that meant he was preparing for the worst. "Stay sharp," he warned. And then it came, thundering footsteps like something heavy, something enormous was moving through the colony fast. We barely had time to react before it attacked. The creature, a twisted, hulking thing with too many teeth and claws that glinted like steel in the dim light, burst from the shadows, roaring like a beast that hadn't eaten in weeks. It slammed into us with terrifying force, sending Jax flying into a nearby wall. Wyatt fired off a shot, hitting the creature square in the chest, but it only seemed to anger it more. I scrambled backward, my heart pounding in my throat, trying to find some kind of cover. But the creature was fast, too fast. It lunged at me, teeth snapping, claws slicing through the air. But Wyatt was there, pulling me out of the way just in time. The creature's claws missed me by inches, slicing through the metal of the building instead. "Run!" Wyatt yelled, firing off another shot. "We can't fight this thing! Not here!" We didn't need to be told twice. We bolted through the crumbling streets, the creature hot on our heels. I could hear its breath, raspy, angry, hungry, getting closer and closer with every step. "What the hell is that thing?" I shouted, my legs burning as I sprinted. "I don't know," Elena yelled back, "but it's not friendly." We rounded a corner and suddenly, there it was, the colony's power station. The lights flickered weakly, but it was still operational. A small victory in an otherwise hellish situation. "Get inside!" Wyatt barked, covering our retreat as we dashed into the building. The creature slammed into the doors just as we shut them, shaking the entire structure. We all stood there, breathing hard, hearts pounding in our chests. "That was too close," Jack said, leaning against the wall, his face pale. "No kidding," I muttered, still trying to catch my breath. As we gathered ourselves, Elena pointed to a console in the corner. A red light blinked, demanding attention. I approached it cautiously, fingers trembling as I activated the monitor. A message began to play, an old recording, looped on repeat. The image was grainy, the audio distorted, but the words were clear enough. "The invaders are here. We can't hold them back. We thought the planet was uninhabited. We were wrong." I looked back at the others, dread settling in the pit of my stomach. "The invaders," Wyatt muttered, his expression grim. "That thing out there isn't alone." "We need to figure out what happened here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, and fast. As we delved deeper into the colony systems, the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fall into place. The settlers hadn't just been here to colonize. They had been experimenting. Genetic modifications, splicing human DNA with alien species. The result? Monsters? The invaders weren't aliens from another planet. They were the settlers themselves. Twisted, mutated, transformed into the very creatures that now hunted us. "Oh, no," Jax whispered, staring at the data logs in horror. "They did this to themselves. We have to stop it," Elena said, her voice hard. "There's still a lab somewhere beneath the colony. That's where it all started. If we can find it, maybe we can shut it down." "Or destroy it," Wyatt added grimly. We didn't have much choice. With the power station now temporarily keeping the creatures at bay, we navigated through the colony's underground tunnels, searching for the lab. The deeper we went, the darker it got, the air growing thick with something I could only describe as malevolent. Finally, we found it. The lab. It was worse than any of us could have imagined. Rows upon rows of cryogenic pods filled with settlers frozen in time. Some were human. Others, not so much. They had been caught mid-transformation. Their bodies twisted into grotesque shapes, their faces locked in eternal expressions of pain and terror. But one pod stood out from the rest. It was open, recently opened. A trail of blood led away from it, deeper into the lab. Before we could react, the ground beneath us began to tremble. A low, guttural growl echoed through the tunnels, vibrating through the walls and straight into my chest. The ground shook again, more violently this time, and the lab's lights flickered as the sound grew louder. It wasn't the same creature that had attacked us earlier. This was something bigger, something angrier. Jax's eyes darted toward the trail of blood leading deeper into the facility. We've got to move. Whatever came out of that pod is coming back. Wyatt nodded sharply. We follow the trail. It's our only lead. Whatever was in that pod knows what happened here. We need to stop it. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. And if we can't stop it, we will, Wyatt replied, his jaw set. We don't have a choice. With that, we hurried deeper into the lab, following the blood-streaked path through a series of dimly lit corridors. Each step seemed to take us closer to the heart of whatever catastrophe had befallen this place. The air grew colder and the smell of decay was overwhelming. I kept one hand on my blaster, my other clutching the small flashlight on my wrist, casting weak beams of light that danced across the walls. The trail of blood led us to a massive chamber. The center of the room was dominated by a huge containment unit shattered from the inside out. Tubes hung from the ceiling like lifeless vines, and the control consoles around the room blinked weakly, struggling to maintain power. It was clear now. Whatever had been held here wasn't just an experiment. It was the culmination of the settlers' research, the final product of their twisted ambition. Dear God, Elena whispered, stepping closer to the control panel, her fingers hesitating over the controls. This was their masterpiece. Whatever they were trying to create, it worked. They made something that wasn't meant to exist. I moved cautiously toward one of the shattered glass panes, peering into the darkness beyond. For a moment I thought I saw movement, a shadow shifting in the black void. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel it. Something was out there, watching us. Jax! Always the first to break the silence, muttered. Whatever it is, it's still here. Suddenly, from the far side of the chamber, a loud crash echoed through the room, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large moving toward us. Elena, what do we do? Wyatt asked, keeping his blaster trained on the shadows. We need to shut this place down, she shouted, her voice trembling. Destroy the lab, the equipment, everything. It's the only way to stop whatever this is from spreading. Another crash, this one closer. I could see the hulking form now, a creature even more grotesque than the one we'd encountered earlier. Its body was twisted and malformed, muscles bulging unnaturally beneath its pale, leathery skin. Its face, barely human, was contorted in a mix of rage and pain. It was a living nightmare. The thing that had emerged from the pod. We've got company, Jack shouted, firing off a shot at the creature as it lumbered toward us. The bolt struck its shoulder, but it barely flinched. It let out a deep, guttural growl, its glowing eyes fixed on us. Fall back, Wyatt ordered, backing up toward the control panel where Elena was frantically typing. We need time. I'm working on it, Elena shouted, her fingers flying across the console. I'm setting the core to overload, but I need a few more minutes. Don't think we have that long, I shouted as the creature closed in on us, moving faster now. Jax and I fired in unison, our blaster shots slamming into its chest, but it kept coming, relentless and unstoppable. The ground shook again, and this time the lights flickered violently. Elena, Wyatt's voice was sharp, desperate. I've almost got it, she yelled, her eyes never leaving the screen. Just hold it off a little longer. The creature roared, lunging toward Jax with terrifying speed. He barely had time to dodge, the thing's claws raking across the floor where he'd been standing a second earlier. I fired again, this time aiming for its legs, but it was no use. It was too strong, too fast. Wyatt, we need to go, I shouted, feeling the panic rising in my chest. We can't stop this thing. Wyatt turned to Elena. How much longer? 1 minute, she snapped, her voice high with tension. We don't have a minute, Jax growled, ducking under another swipe from the creature. We need to get out of here. Now! The creature lunged again, this time catching Jax in the side. He cried out in pain, blood seeping through his suit as he staggered back, clutching his side. No! I screamed, firing shot after shot at the thing's head, but it was like shooting at a wall. Nothing slowed it down. Elena! Wyatt shouted, desperation clear in his voice now. I'm done, she yelled, slamming her hand down on the final control. The core's overloading. We need to move, now. The creature roared again, but this time there was something different in its voice, pain. The lights around the room began to flicker more violently, sparks flying from the broken equipment. The temperature in the room started to rise, and I realized what was happening. The core was going to blow. Run! Wyatt shouted, grabbing Jax and hauling him to his feet. Move! Move! We sprinted toward the exit, the creature still stumbling after us, but slower now, weakened by the growing instability of the lab. The walls shook violently, pieces of the ceiling crashing down around us as we raced through the corridors, the ground cracking beneath our feet. Behind us, I could hear the creature's furious roars echoing through the tunnels, but it was fading, consumed by the chaos we'd unleashed. We burst out of the lab and into the open air, the colony crumbling around us. I could see the ship in the distance, still intact, its lights a beacon in the dark, chaotic landscape. We ran toward it, my heart pounding in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Just as we reached the ship, the ground behind us erupted in a massive explosion. The force of the blast sent us tumbling into the landing bay, debris raining down around us. I scrambled to my feet, dragging Jax with me as Wyatt and Elena ran ahead, the ship's ramp lowering just in time. We dove inside, the ramp closing behind us as the ship's engines roared to life. I didn't wait for orders. I punched the controls and we shot up into the sky. The ground beneath us turning to fire and ash as the colony was consumed by the explosion. For a few moments, none of us spoke. We just stared out the window as the burning wreckage of the colony disappeared into the atmosphere, swallowed by the clouds. Finally, Wyatt broke the silence. Is everyone okay? Jax winced, still holding his side, but nodded. Yeah, I'll live. Elena leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. That was too close. I glanced at Wyatt, the weight of everything we'd just seen pressing down on me. Do you think it's over? Wyatt was silent for a long moment, staring out at the ruined planet below. Then he turned to me, his expression grim. For now,